Imagine for a second a bank robber. Your mind probably pictures a tough guy with a balaclava, a sawed-off shotgun, and a car with the engine running waiting at the door. Now, erase that image. Imagine a 20-year-old kid with glasses, acne, a rock band hoodie, and a backpack full of advanced calculus books. He carries no weapons, he wears no mask. His only tool is a small piece of plastic with a copper wire and an LED bulb that he soldered in his dorm room while eating instant noodles. This kid walks into a pub, orders a Coke, approaches the slot machine in the corner, and without breaking anything, without threatening anyone, and without tripping any alarms, he empties the entire machine in 5 minutes, and then he goes to thermodynamics class as if nothing happened. This isn't a scene from a Hollywood hacker movie. This actually happened in Dublin, Ireland in the late 90s. This is the story of how a group of engineering students from Dublin City University, DCU, declared war on the gambling industry. They weren't career criminals. They were bored geniuses. They discovered a glitch in the matrix, a design flaw in the world's most popular coin validation mechanism, and decided to exploit it. What started as a prank to get beer money turned into an organized operation that brought casino owners to their knees, mobilized private investigators, and forever changed the security of vending machines. Today, you are going to meet the legend of the engineers who turned academic knowledge into a money-making machine. To understand how this masterstroke came to be, we have to travel to the Dublin of 1998. Ireland was about to become the Celtic tiger, an economic powerhouse, but for university students, reality was very different. They lived counting coins. The grant barely covered the rent of cold, damp rooms. Fun consisted of going to the pub, drinking cheap pints, and staring at the flashing lights of slot machines that seemed to mock them. Those machines were everywhere. In pubs, in chip shops, in arcades. They were metal predators designed to take the little money the working class had. In the DCU engineering department, there was a group of friends. Let's call them the Circle. They were the typical students who took apart their toasters to see how they worked. Their leader, a third-year electronics student with a brilliant mind and flexible morality, was obsessed with a concept: security by obscurity. He believed systems weren't secure because they were perfect, but because people didn't know how they worked. If you knew how something worked, you could break it. One rainy night, after losing his last 5 pounds on a poker machine in the campus bar, the leader didn't get angry. He stared at the coin slot. He didn't see a slot machine. He saw an input and output system. He saw an engineering problem. He convinced his friends to do something radical. They bought an old second-hand slot machine. They hauled it up to their dorm room amidst pizza boxes and textbooks, and they opened it up. They didn't want to play. They wanted to perform an autopsy. What they found inside was the brain of the beast, the Mars coin validator. At that time, the Mars mechanism was the gold standard. It was in cigarette machines, train ticket machines, and slot machines all over Europe. It was supposed to be infallible. It used a series of optical and magnetic sensors to measure the diameter, weight, and metal alloy of every coin that entered. If the coin was valid, it sent a digital signal to the machine's motherboard saying "credit accepted." The students spent weeks analyzing the mechanism. They used oscilloscopes borrowed from university labs. They mapped the circuits. And then they found the Achilles heel, the flaw. It turned out the validator had a moment of blindness, an instant of milliseconds where the light sensor waited for confirmation that the coin had dropped into the hopper. If you could trick that sensor, if you could make it believe the coin had passed without actually dropping, the machine would give you the credit, but you would keep the coin. It was the yo-yo theory, the trick of the coin on a string, but taken to the level of aerospace engineering. A string wasn't enough. Modern sensors had blades to cut strings. They needed something more sophisticated. They needed to hack the light. They designed a tool. It didn't look like much. It was a strip of rigid plastic, cut with millimeter precision, with a small pattern of holes, and in some more advanced prototypes, a small infrared light emitter powered by a watch battery. They called it the spider. The idea was to insert the spider into the coin slot. The plastic tricked the mechanical sensors, opening the gates. Then, the light emitter, or the hole pattern, confused the optical sensor. The machine thought, a 50-pence coin has entered, and added the credit. But the coin didn't exist, and the spider could be pulled out and put back in. The first field test was an operation worthy of special forces, but executed by kids with acne. They chose a busy pub in North Dublin, a Friday night. Noise, smoke, chaos, the perfect atmosphere. One of the students, the calmest one, approached the machine. His friends formed a human barrier around him, pretending to drink and chat, blocking the bartender's view. The student pulled the spider from his sleeve. His hands were shaking. If he got caught, he wouldn't just be kicked out of the bar, he'd be kicked out of university. He could go to jail. He took a deep breath. He inserted the device into the slot. He felt the resistance of the springs. He pushed a little more. And then it happened. The most beautiful sound in the world for a poor student. The digital ding-ding-ding of credits going up. 50 pence, £1, £2, £5. In a matter of seconds, the machine had 20 pounds of credit without swallowing a single real coin. The student pressed the cash out button. The machine started spitting out real coins. Clank, 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 clank. The metallic sound falling into the tray was deafening. They looked at each other. The fear vanished. What arrived was euphoria. They had just turned a piece of plastic into an ATM. That night, they bought beer for the whole dorm. No one asked where the money had come from. But that was just the beginning. The problem with engineers is that they always want to optimize processes. They didn't settle for 20 pounds. They wanted to scale. They went back to the clandestine lab in their room. They refined the design. They made the spider thinner, more durable, more discreet, and they started recruiting. Not just anyone, but other trusted engineering students. The knowledge was shared like a Masonic secret. "Look at this," they'd say, showing the diagram of the Mars validator. It was a secret society based on soldering irons and tin. Over the next few months, Dublin became their game board. They organized into cells. They had routes. They knew which pubs had the old machines, easier to hack, and which had the new ones, which required version 2.0 of the spider. They acted with discipline. They never emptied the machine completely in one place so as not to raise immediate suspicion. They took 50 pounds here, 30 there. They paid for books, paid rent, bought better food. They felt like Robin Hood. They were stealing from the machines that stole from the poor. Who could blame them? But easy money is a dangerous drug, and like any drug, it builds tolerance. They started getting sloppy. They started getting greedy. They didn't just go to dark pubs anymore. They went to arcades in broad daylight. They went to train stations. Here is where the antagonist of our story enters. The Irish amusements industry in Ireland is not a charity. It is a hard business, run by hard men who don't look kindly on anyone touching their profits. The Irish Amusements Trade Association started noticing something strange in their balance sheets. The machines didn't add up. The accountants said thousands of pounds had been paid out in prizes, but the cash boxes were empty of incoming coins. At first, they thought it was mechanical failure. Then, they thought it was employees stealing. They fired innocent bartenders. They fired maintenance staff. But the theft continued. Before we continue, I remind you that if you are enjoying the video so far, remember you can hit the like button and subscribe. They hired private investigators, ex-cops with a nose for the street. These bloodhounds started patrolling the pubs. They weren't looking for habitual criminals. They were looking for patterns. And they found one. Groups of young men with student backpacks crowding around machines and leaving quickly. The tension started to rise. At the university, rumors started circulating. "Watch out, there are people watching. Yesterday I saw a guy in a suit at O'Donoghue's pub who kept staring at people's hands." The group leader called an emergency meeting in the dorm. "We have to stop," he said, "or we have to be smarter." They decided to pull one last big job before final exams. The target wasn't a pub. It was a large arcade in the city center, full of the most modern machines, the ones with the biggest jackpots. It was risky. There were cameras, there was security at the door. But the arrogance of youth is blind. They designed a new tool, an electronic device that emitted a specific electromagnetic pulse. They no longer needed to insert anything physical. They just had to hold the device close to the machine's casing, near the validator's processor, and press a button. The pulse momentarily fried the machine's logic and forced it to reboot in payout mode or add phantom credits due to interference. It was cutting-edge technology applied to larceny. On the night of the heist, The air was charged with electricity. They split into 3 teams. They entered the arcade. The noise of video games and strobe lights was their cover. The first team approached a row of big Bertha slots. The leader pulled out the pulse device, which looked like a simple modified garage remote. He got close. Click. The machine blinked. The screen went black for a second, and then it turned back on with the credit counter at maximum. It worked. They started cashing out. Coins cascaded down. The sound was intoxicating. They filled their pockets. They filled their backpacks. But they had underestimated the enemy. The arcade owner wasn't stupid. He had installed high-resolution hidden cameras focused specifically on the coin slots, alerted by the association's reports. From his office, he saw the flash. He saw the device. He didn't call the police immediately. He called his bouncers. He locked the main doors. Suddenly, the venue's music stopped. The lights came on at full brightness, that ugly white light that reveals the dirt on the carpet and the fear on faces. "Nobody leaves here," boomed a voice over the speakers. The students froze. They had backpacks full of stolen coins and electronic evidence in their pockets. Panic took over. They looked toward the emergency exit. It was blocked by a guy who looked like a 2-door wardrobe. They were trapped. The leader, proving why he was the brains, had a moment of clarity amidst the terror. "To the bathroom," he whispered. They ran toward the men's toilets before security could intercept them. They locked themselves in a stall. "What do we do? They're going to kill us," shouted one of the younger guys. "Give it to me," said the leader. He took the electromagnetic pulse device. He threw it in the toilet. He flushed. The water carried away the main evidence. Then they started emptying the backpacks. They threw kilos of coins into the trash, behind the cistern, even out the bathroom window that opened onto a narrow alley. They got rid of the loot. When security finally kicked the bathroom door down, they found 3 scared kids peeing at the urinals with empty backpacks. They searched them. They found nothing incriminating. There were no spiders. There were no devices. Just engineering books and a few loose pennies. The arcade owner was furious. He knew it was them. The cameras had seen it, but the image was grainy. It wasn't clear what they had in their hand. Without physical evidence of the hacking device, the police couldn't detain them on anything but suspicion. They interrogated them for hours. They threatened to call their parents, the university dean. But the boys, trained in logic, kept their mouths shut. "We were just playing, sir. The machine went crazy and gave us the money. We got scared and threw it away." They let them go. But that night, walking back to campus in the cold Dublin rain, without the money and with their hearts racing, they understood that the war was over. They had won a battle, but they had almost lost the war of their lives. The game had stopped being fun. However, the story doesn't end here. What these students did had a domino effect that changed the industry forever. The trade association, unable to prosecute them criminally due to a lack of solid physical evidence at the time, did something smarter. They contacted the university, not to expel them, but to understand. Rumor has it there was a secret meeting. Engineers from Mars Electronics, the company that made the validators, flew to Dublin. They sat down with the DCU professors. They analyzed what had happened. The students anonymously sent a white paper detailing the vulnerability. They didn't want money. They wanted to close the chapter. Thanks to that report, Mars released a global update for their validators. They changed the frequency of the optical sensors. They introduced electromagnetic shielding. They changed the software to detect phantom coin patterns. The security hole the students had exploited was closed forever. Today, those students are respectable engineers. They work at big tech companies, in cybersecurity and systems design. They probably have mortgages, kids, and family cars. But every now and then, when they walk into a pub and see an old slot machine in the corner, a half smile escapes them. They touch their pocket looking for a piece of plastic they no longer carry. They remember the time when they were the kings of Dublin, the silicone pirates who defeated the house with a piece of wire and a brilliant mind. This story teaches us something fundamental about technology and security. No matter how advanced a system is, no matter how much money it costs, always, absolutely always, there will be a bored student in a dorm room, hungry and curious, who will find a way to break it. The industry calls it a threat. We call it human ingenuity. And even though what they did was illegal, there is a certain poetry to it. In a world where corporations always win, where the odds are designed for the common man to lose, these kids tipped the scales in their favor for a brief moment. They didn't use force, they used physics. They turned the laws of electronics into their accomplice. The next time you put a coin in a vending machine and hear the internal mechanism buzz and click, processing your payment, remember that buzz is the sound of a constant battle between lockmakers and keymakers. And remember the DCU students who for one glorious winter held the master key to the city. But beware of the moral. Don't try this at home. Today's machines are computers connected to the cloud. They have cameras with facial recognition. They have real-time fraud detection algorithms. If you try to stick a piece of plastic in a machine today, you'll most likely end up explaining your engineering thesis to an unfriendly cellmate. Times have changed, but the legend remains. And maybe, just maybe, in some university lab right now, there's a new group of students looking at a new technology. Maybe artificial intelligence, maybe blockchain. Not with awe, but with that mischievous and analytical look, looking for the crack, looking for the glitch, preparing for the next big heist. Because curiosity is the only force in the universe that cannot be stopped. And when curiosity mixes with necessity, stories worth telling are born.